Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, you know, I'm going to try to get this out. Senator Pittman, it's too bad she's so laid back you can't tell what's on her mind. Let's give her another hand. That was great. I want to thank Senator Kay Floyd, who spoke earlier and was responsible for getting Hillary on the ballot here. Thank you, Representative George Young. I thank all the local ministers who are here. And let's give a big hand to Sue Starr, the principal of this great school, for letting us come here tonight and for the great work they do every day.
Test.
I love
Test.
Oklahoma. My friend Mike Turpin makes fun of me because I always say, I love Oklahoma more than any other place I never carried.
Test.
But I did win the Democratic primary here, and so did Hillary when she ran, and I want you to win it for her again. How's that? It feels better, but it doesn't have any sound. You know, sound good, looks good, no sound. Pretty is as pretty does. Let's see, is it on now? Who cares? You got it. Now look, you guys are in a great humor, but it's a serious election. We got a lot riding on it. How many of you saw the president's last State of the Union speech? Okay. Now, what he said was true, and now let's give you about a minute and a half of it. He said, folks, I know we still have problems, but we've come a mighty long way. We are the best performing big economy in the world. We've had 14 million jobs in 5 years. The most since that other Democrat was president in 1990. And he said, for the first time in our history, we have 90% of our people with health insurance. We have the youngest, most diverse workforce of any big country in the world. We got the best colleges and universities and community colleges. We've got the best science and technology. So embrace change and build on it. Don't run away from it. Now, that's all true. Why is all this crazy stuff happening in this election? Because it is not experienced by enough of us yet. Because it takes a long time to get over a financial crash, and 80% of the people hadn't had a pay raise since that crash. That's weird, right? And because there are lots of young people who got college degrees and are up to their ears in debt, and they can't move out of their families' houses because they won't be able to pay rent and make their debt payment. They got jobs they really don't like, but they got to make them to pay the debts. We need a president who will take what has happened that is good and open the doors of prosperity and opportunity to all Americans, every single one of us. Now, this is a really big deal. I know one of their candidates in the other party always says he's going to make America great again. Let me tell you something. America never stopped being great again, never. What we need to do is make America whole again so we can all go together. So we can all go together. Hillary's position is simple. You got to break down every barrier to all going together. And you got to build letters of opportunity so we can all go together. A lot of them are economic and some of them aren't. And those of us who come from this part of the country know a lot of them are economic, but some of them aren't. And we got to do it all. And we need a president who can help us go into the future together in a very troubled world and keep us safe and strong. Now, to me, it's pretty clear who the most well-suited person for president is. Not because of her resume, but because of her actions. She believes that the world ought to work, and America sure ought to work, the way Oklahoma City worked after the Murrah building came down. And you inspired the whole world because all of a sudden, it didn't matter what your race was, what your gender was, what your age was, whatever your what was. We were doing this together. It works better, doesn't it? And then we all get careless and we let things get out of whack and we forget that this country never works if you leave people behind. It never works unless everybody's got a chance to get a good job and make a good living and have a good future. So the first thing is we got to have more good jobs. We got to have good jobs in building a modern infrastructure, in building a clean energy superpower, in building new manufacturing based on all these little 3D printers kids are working on in Arkansas and Oklahoma and places like that. And we got to remember that 2/3 of our jobs come from small businesses, and we got to make sure that our banks are empowered again to loan money to people who have good ideas and deserve a chance to start their businesses. Then we got to get the load of debt off these young people's back and free them up. She believes tuition ought to be free for middle-class kids and lower-income people should get more help. That then people ought to pay what they can, but not too much. And every student who needs it ought to have a right to work 10 hours a week and earn money while in college. And upper-income people ought to pay their own way because we've got to keep the costs down while we get the enrollment and the graduation up. For the people that are already out, this is the most important thing of all. And I want you to think about this because when I was president and when President Obama was first in office, we both passed the biggest college aid plans since the great GI Bill after World War II, and both of us found that all the gains we gave to students went away in the higher cost of college within 5 years. So we've got all this debt. Hillary says, first of all, it's wrong that a college loan is the only kind of loan you can't refinance. You refinance your home mortgage, you can't refinance that. If we did that today, what she advocates, 25 million young people overnight could save $2,000 in costs on their loans. Just refinance it. Secondly, if you buy a home, you can get a 20 or 30-year mortgage because it's a lifetime asset. If you get a college degree, it's a 40 or 50-year asset. So she thinks you ought to be able to pay it back over 20 years as a low fixed percentage of your after-tax income. Then if you want to move out of your parents' house and rent a place, you can. And they might be glad too, you can't ever tell. Then your credit score won't be compromised. So if you want to go borrow $40,000, $50,000 to start a new business, you can. Free again. Every time I can, when I'm driving around America, I'll go in and buy coffee somewhere. And there'll be inevitably some young person serving me. The other night, I was on the way home from New York, and I stopped in this coffee shop, and this young, really articulated African-American girl was telling me, I said, how long you worked here? She said, on and off, 5 years. I'm not making this up. I said, what was the off about? She said, that's when I was going to college. I said, the on is when I have to go pay the debt back. I said, you living at home? She said, oh, yeah. Mama doesn't make enough to help me, but at least I don't have to pay rent. There are millions of people like that all over this country. It is wrong. We should set them free. And they can take jobs they love. If they pay less, they'll pay less on their note, a fixed percentage of their income. And if they become teachers or nurses or police officers or otherwise engage in public service, they can knock 20% of that loan off for every year they do those public jobs. That's what we need in America. But we also need to put some more money in places that have been left out and left behind. That's a barrier too. We did that when I was president. Some of you know my office is in Harlem now, in New York City. When I took office, the unemployment rate was 24%. When I left, it was 8%, down by 2/3. Why? Because we said, if you invest in Harlem, we'll give you a big tax credit. They're just as smart as everybody else. They got a great history. They got great assets. Don't live anyplace else. We need to do that for coal country. We need to do that for the Indian countries, places that do not have gambling. We need to do that in the Mississippi Delta. We need to do that in all these small towns in rural America. They can do it. We also need to build modern infrastructure, which will create millions of jobs. Not just roads and bridges and ports and airports, but what's under the ground. You all know this in your heart of hearts. Were you sick about that deal in Flint, Michigan? Yeah, but here's what you need to know. It is far from the only place in America where children have elevated lead levels in their blood. And Hillary was just sick about it because when we met in law school, she took an extra year at the Yale Child Study Center to study child development and all the handicaps being poor put on a kid. It can shrink your brain. It can shrink your head. Even if you look normal, it can literally mess up the parts of your brain that teach you to concentrate and have self-control. So that if your mother, when she's pregnant, or you when you're a little kid, have too much lead, it can lead in later life to the fact that you can't concentrate long enough to finish school, and your impulse control is so weak, you're more likely to commit crimes. This is not something I made up. There's lots of evidence here. We need to fix the underground pipes of America so nobody has lead in their body. And I'll tell you something else. To the younger people here, this will make perfect sense. You want to help small towns in rural America? Put affordable, rapid broadband in every community, in every rural area in America, and you will create a whole new economy. You will bring a world to people. There's a lot of other non-economic problems. Biggest social problem in America that cuts across all racial lines is this epidemic of prescription drug and heroin abuse. In state after state after state, more people are dying of this than they are from car accidents. And it's closely connected with economic distress. Our neighbors in West Virginia have the second weakest economy in America now because the bottom's dropped out of the coal economy. I'm all for cleaning up the air. But we ought to help them to begin again. It's not the miners' fault. It's not their family's fault. They're doing the best they can. Why haven't we done anything to help them begin again? And why is it that they have the second weakest economy and the highest percentage of people addicted to prescription drugs and heroin in the United States of America? They are dying of a broken heart, and nobody in America should die with a broken heart if we go forward together, if we solve these things together. So, we need the mental health. We need the treatment. We need this miracle drug, naloxone. I've worked very hard on that to get it in every high school in America, every college. We're working on that. But we have to do this together. We got to tear down the economic and the non-economic barriers. Young people are tired of seeing young African-American men shot on video when they're not armed. We need police reform. But we need police reform and we need police. Because don't forget, when we saw that terrible tragedy in San Bernardino, we saw the police go in there time after time and risk their lives to save people without regard to their race, their religion, their anything. We need that. We got to get this together, and we can only do it. We can only do it when we trust each other again, because the police look more like the people they're policing, and because when people make a mistake, the neighborhood has a meeting with the police, they decide what happens and what we're going to do next. She will do that for us. She will help to lead us to that kind of place. You know, I hear our friends in the other party having these debates on immigration. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. You try to send 11.5 million people home, and the economy will collapse. These young dreamers, they were brought here when they were kids. It's not their fault. They're up late at night worrying now. They hear all these debates. They say, they're going to kick me out of my school. You're going to leave me in my school and kick my parents out? I'll be all alone in America. They're scared to death. We need immigration reform. We need not to be prejudiced against anybody that waited in line. They ought to go first because they followed the law. But we ought to quit tearing the living daylights out of our country and recognize that our youth and our diversity are our meal tickets to the future. We should embrace it. Now, there's lots of other things I could talk about. And you probably got your list, but I'm just telling you, we got to tear down all the barriers, not just the economic ones, and we got to build ladders that everybody can climb. That's Hillary's whole program in a sentence. You got to have inclusive economics, inclusive societies, and you got to have inclusive politics. Starting with making an appointment to the Supreme Court who thinks you all ought to vote. You know, I think the president should make that appointment. I think if the Senate declines to confirm, then we got to win this race. But whether there's a new justice confirmed or not, the chances are at least 50-50 that the next president will get another 1 or 2 appointments. We have had all these amazing cases. The Citizens United case says that your right to free speech includes all the money in your pocket, which means that a billionaire and a minimum wage worker are equally free to spend whatever they want on the next election. That was never the law. That's not a strict reading of the Constitution. That didn't have anything to do with anything but helping people who would be helped by that decision. We need to grow together again. Everybody's voice should be heard. Everybody's voice should be heard as equally as possible. Now they've agreed to review the one person, one vote decision, one of the most important cases decided since the end of World War II. Says if you run for the state legislature, you run for the House of Representatives, you not only deserve a district that's not drawn in a discriminatory way, everybody ought to represent roughly the same number of folks. They're actually trying to change that. Say, no, it only affects registered voters or eligible voters. So if you want to represent an area, suppose this area here with all this great school and all the things that are offered, suppose the average size of a family is 4 kids. I'm making this up, but you get the deal. The average size of a family in America now is slightly under 2 kids. But they've each got the same number of eligible voters. You get it, don't you? If you got to take care of poor kids, you're out of luck. You're not going to be well represented. We have to go forward together. So Hillary's plan is simple. Inclusive economics, inclusive social policies, inclusive politics. And one other thing, we live in a tough world. You need somebody who's had the experience she's had on the Armed Services Committee. Someone who's had the experience she had picking up the pieces of people wounded in the Iraq War and in Afghanistan and giving them a chance to start their lives again. When Hillary was still a senator, a young man came up to me and said in the Capitol one day, I was there on my foundation work, just working on health care in Africa and Asia and Latin America. And this guy I didn't know, handsome young man in a uniform, came to me and said, I want you to know that I represent the Pentagon on Capitol Hill. And we believe over there that your wife knows more about our business and the impact of what we're doing on families than any member of Congress in either house and either party. You should be proud of that, and I want you to know it. You need that. You know how many people you got from Oklahoma who were in the National Guard or reserves and fought in Afghanistan or Iraq, came home wounded? She sponsored the law with a Republican to make sure they got the same health care that regular veterans got. You need that. You need somebody who's gone toe-to-toe with President Putin, gotten a nuclear agreement, and got 67 Republicans to vote and Democrats to vote for it in the Senate. Everything she did as Secretary of State or as a senator, she had Democrats and Republicans doing it. Inclusive politics. That's why they're trying so hard to beat her, because they don't want to run against her, because they know she'll be the grown-up in every room and make them do something good for everybody. It's fine. This is important. Look, if you believe that we're the best positioned country for the future, if you believe we can't take advantage of it unless we can all walk through the door to the future together, if you believe that we need an inclusive economic policy where we can all prosper, an inclusive social policy where everybody treated fairly, an inclusive politics where everybody's voice is more or less equal, and a world policy that says, yeah, we need a tough military, yes, we need a strong defense, diplomacy, but we also got to make a world with more partners and fewer enemies, because we cannot possibly kill, jail, or occupy everybody that's mad at us. Then you ought to be for her. She was the first person that modernized the State Department to bring in social media experts so we could win the battle of the brains going on in 1 billion places all over the world. Everything she ever touched, she made better. The real issue in this election is who's the best change maker, who can empower you more to be part of that golden future the president talked about. I don't think it's close. When she got out of law school, she went to South Carolina and tried to stop them from jailing African-American teenagers as adults and ruining their lives. She went to Alabama and tried to stop them from falsely claiming tax exemptions for what were purely segregationist academies. She went to South Texas, where I'm going when I leave you, and registered Hispanic voters that had never had a chance to vote before because nobody wanted them to vote. She came back not far from here to the Arkansas Ozarks to be with me, and gave those poor working people the chance to get decent legal assistance if they'd been worked over in an unfair way. Everything she ever touched, she made better. So, if you want to grow together, if you want rising wages, if you want everybody to grow, first you got to believe we can do it. We can do it. We can do it. We did do it. When I was president and we replaced trickle-down economics with inclusive economics, 95% of the people did better than they did under President Reagan. The top 5% did a little better under him, not enough to count. The next 15 did 10% better. The upper middle class did 25% better under inclusive economics. The middle did 70% better. The working people's income gains were more than twice as much. And listen to this. People working out of poverty into their first jobs, the bottom 20% of earners, their incomes went up 30 times as much, and we moved 100 times as many people out of poverty. And it was the only time I can find in the history of America when we all rose together, but the highest median income gains were, in percentage terms, among African-American families, followed by Hispanic families, followed by other people of all backgrounds. We did it together. We can do it again. We can do it again. Will you go out and tell your fellow Oklahomans that? Look, I can't be in Oklahoma without mentioning one other thing. The greatest African-American scholar since World War II was a native Oklahoman named John Hope Franklin. He died in his 90s and I had the honor of speaking at his funeral. We had become very close friends. He was the chairman of the Commission on Race that I established. And his whole goal in life was to erase for every American ethnic group the burden of what he called the color line, so we could go together. The color line in economics, the color line in housing and education and health care and law enforcement, you name it. You got a chance to elect a president who has spent a lifetime trying to tear down those barriers and build up those ladders. I'm telling you, President Obama told the truth. We're a great country. We just need to get together and make it whole again. Help Hillary do that. Thank you.